Welcome to this video on the Zenwara channel. My name is Sri Satguru Buddha Rawa Bhagwan. Today's video, first of all, I'd like to start the video by congratulating Alexander Ovechkin, the hockey player in the NHL, National Hockey League, who has beaten Wayne Gretzky's goal record. So congratulations, Ovechkin. I've been following your career since you started. In fact, I've even owned your rookie card at one point. And congratulations. Good job. Today's video is going to be about the subject of places of worship in the world. Okay, and talking about all worlds, I guess, but specifically about our world in this case. And the subject of places of worship that set a limitation on the specific spiritual or religious affiliation or specification of an individual to allow them access to that place of worship. Okay. Now, some places, some temples, some areas in the world limit people who go to that temple, who enter, for example, to a specific religion, for example. So this is a practice that is done. It's a practice that was adopted by certain cultural, traditional, heritage, religious, we'll call it constructions or places of organized spirituality, of organized religion, brought together within a roof or a series of roofs or a specific area of the world. So basically limiting someone's access to a church, limiting someone's access to a mosque, limiting someone's access to a synagogue, limiting someone's access to a temple, limiting someone's access to a spiritual place in this world, or a place that's known as a spiritual place or a gathering of spiritual people. This is a very slippery path. When you turn around and you say we're not letting someone into a place of worship, it's a very slippery path, because you are making that decision as a spiritual practitioner, right? But often a spiritual practitioner is turning to a specific deity or God himself, right? Or a spiritual being of a higher order. So when you basically set up a place of worship to that being of a higher order, okay, in the organizational chart of priorities and basically governance of the system and its higher functions, okay, well, all of a sudden you're limiting the access to that deity or God himself that is worshipped in that place of worship. So you're limiting access to that place of worship to other people that you have decided to say are not allowed in that place of worship. Right? Maybe because they have a different skin color, okay? Maybe because they don't look like you or like someone you know, okay, or someone local, right? So there is a problem in some cases with disrespectful tourism. People do tourism, but even tourism is basically a person who's a tourist and who ends up going into a very powerful spiritual place of worship. That place is probably going to have an impact on them. Is probably part of their journey if they make it there. So the thing is, when you limit someone from going to a place of worship, you limit the people the access to that place of worship or to the divine parts of that place of worship or its connection to the divine. So you serve as a gatekeeper in that way now between other people and that divinity that you're going to, or God. So is that really a position in which you want to put yourself? Where you're putting yourself in a position where you're trying to be like a hustler in between God and other people? So that's a good question. Okay, maybe disrespectful tourism is not fun and bothers local practitioners, but who are these local practitioners to complain when someone makes a way to the same God as them? You know, do they not want their God to have other people? Or is it because they're jealous, maybe, with their God? You know, do you think their God wants them to limit people's access to them? Actually, the way it works out with gods, okay, is that there's an agreement within gods that when one person goes from one Ishtadevata to another, from one chosen deity to another, when they move in their positioning in the organizational chart of governance, of priorities, of system governance, okay, well then that is supposed to be a free flow of systems from one governance system to another, okay, because it's people's right, in theory, to be able to migrate from one place to another, and sometimes they even get chosen by another being, and there should be, and at that point there's an interaction at the level of the gods where they say, can I go get that one person on your team? I'd like to make a trade here. I'd like to go get him, bring him under me, okay, and I'll do this for you in exchange at that point. Because the other god says, whoa, wait a second, that person didn't want to go to you for any so why should I send them to you? Oh, by the way, I'm going to make sure that they're going to get a good education under me as a spiritual being, but I would like to use their tools. I need those tools for my processes of systems. So then you can have a transference of an individual from one Ishtadevata to another because a decision is made at the level of those two specific Ishtadevatas that they're going to transfer that person from one to the other in the governance chain of that being. So you can get moved yourself by your own will. You can move from one Ishtadevata to another, or you can also get chosen, right? But free will does exist, okay? Except when the deities decide that they're really going to be doing something at that point, and then at that point free will exists, but you know, you got the deities that are in your life. So this is how it works. Okay. What more could we talk about in this video? I think we're going to leave it at that for now. Okay. I'm going to tell you the truth. I got so into that last subject right there that I kind of forgot a little bit what I was going to talk about initially. Oh yeah, there you go. I just came back. Does that happen to you sometimes? You just have a slight memory, you know, because you're talking about something else. You have to go back to what you were talking about, you know. But that's okay, except if you got Stambanad, you're going to remember, right? So what we were talking about is the interdiction of people of a specific race or of a specific ethnicity that doesn't correspond to yours and your local one to go into a place of worship. Because most likely, for example, you take a place of worship, all the locals are not probably getting all their identity checked when they go in. You know, but if you look different, you're going to get your identity checked. And then, or they'll just say, oh, you can't come in. And you say, well, actually, I'm of the same faith. And then then they might say, oh, it doesn't matter, you can't come in anyways. Right? And then you can try to show them your passport, and if it says you're of the same faith, maybe it'll convince the people at the door, but the chances are you're not going in. So what it basically means is locals only. You know, locals are people that look like us. Okay? That's what it basically means when they say restricted to a specific religion. Okay? It's a slippery slope because you're playing gatekeeper with the god. You're playing gatekeeper with the deity. And maybe that deity doesn't want you playing gatekeeper. Maybe that temple's older than you. That church is older than you. Maybe you founded it, but, you know, are you really the gatekeeper to God? And that's a question in a lot of religions and faiths, right? When you see organized religion, sometimes there's the concept of a priest. You have to go to a priest to go to God. But in the modern age, it's more taking an ideal that the priest is there to maintain the culture, the tradition, the faith, to support, and also to develop spiritually as a leader spiritually and culturally in society, to be able to uphold that light and truth of the divine. So I think that's a beautiful vision of a priest, but not necessarily someone that you need to go to God. No, no, no. This person is not necessarily more special in the eyes of God than you. Okay? But has their beautiful role sometimes in some religions, right? To basically fulfill those functions of maintaining that culture of that religion. And that's a beautiful thing, you know. So whether we talk about imams, okay, whether we talk about Catholic priests or Protestant priests or any priests, whether we talk about pundits, okay, whether we talk about rabbis, okay, when we talk about all those key fundamental people of those spiritual traditions and faiths and cultures and religions, you know, they're all very important people, because God works through them, because they dedicate their lives in many cases to spirituality. So it's easier for God to work through them than someone who's spending all their day, for example, partying or even working all day. You know, you don't think about it, but you're just working all day, and then you go to bed when you get home, and you don't do much else, and it's harder to work through you than someone who's spiritually really seeking to connect to those messages from the divine, if you want to call it that way. Okay. So I think it's a shame when a place is restricting its access to a spiritual place. I think it's a shame. I understand why people do it, but I also think that it should be stopped. I think people should decide of their own free will that we won't restrict people anymore. Because think about it, you could have some very important people. Imagine this. I'll give you any example. Imagine you have any spiritually important being in the story. You know, some people are very important builders, very important doctors, very important lawyers, very important politicians, leaders of countries, and then you have some very important spiritual people. But, you know, imagine imagine a spiritual person, probably close to God, something like that, okay? What religion do they have on their passport? Okay, well, should you be restricting their access to all the other places of religion in the world? If they're a person close to God? Probably not. Probably not, right? Probably if they're close to God and you tell them that they can't come to your place of worship, right? What is God going to think? You know, you're denying my person that I love, that I give spiritual knowledge and power to, you know, in the system. I love you too, but I obviously seem to spiritually like them very much, and you deny them access to a spiritual place. It doesn't make sense. Okay, so imagine that now I'm going to change the scenario a little bit here. Imagine that all people are spiritual beings, because this is the truth. All people are devas, beings of God, beings of light, that take the light of the divine, that come into them and empower them in the threefold process of receiving, holding, and projecting, the processes of yoga and life. Okay? So it doesn't make sense to restrict people. Now, what does make sense is if you have people that you don't recognize, to search them if you have to, and to make sure that they're okay to come in. You know, because you don't want them causing trouble, and you don't want them damaging the place or the people there. So that's great to have security. Security is important in all things, in all processes of this computer. Security is important. But also access to places that are fundamental to people's stories. You know, I'll give you an example. It's like you have, for example, a place of worship, and you say, this place is restricted only to people that look like us. Well, what if your religion, for example, believes in having other people believe or learn your religion? Well, then you're denying people that you profess, for example, to be willing to share your religion with, whether that be convert or share or ally or just share knowledge, you know, and hopefully maybe they believe like you, or maybe you just want to share out of not for God, right? You share God's knowledge in whatever religion or tradition you have. And then all of a sudden, You're stopping someone from coming to the place of worship where the knowledge is a congregate, where all that knowledge is accumulated and the people who have that knowledge accumulate. So it's contradictory. You see, it's a counter process. In one side, you say we share the knowledge, we share our religion, we hold a religion, we promote our religion. And in the other process, we say we limit other people's access to our religion. Right? And this is a dilemma that has existed for a long time. Okay? A long time. It's almost like an intellectual property over religion. People, do we maintain our intellectual property over our processes, our technologies, our secrets, our gods, our saints, or do we share them and then more people come to them and the power of our spiritual beings grow in our systems and all the ones that fall under the processes of our chosen deities and saints, our Ishta Devatas. So do we limit access to our Ishta Devata or do we promote access to our Ishta Devata? Right? But if you limit, you become a gatekeeper. If you promote, you become a devotee. Right? So, because you promote the vision of that devata and the processes of that devata. And hopefully you also act in accordance with the good character of that devata. No matter how soft or angry or rude. No matter how fierce. So, in my opinion, and I speak in this case as a Purna avatar, as the avatar of Vishnu, of Mahavishnu, the Shiva avatar as well, the threefold, three-time avatar, Trimurti avatar and Dashavatar, Mahavidya Purnam avataram. And in that authority of God the Father himself, the creator of the angels, and of this whole system that runs in its window and process, well, my thought is that we should never limit someone access to any form of the divine. Never. I'm going to leave it at that on this video. And I'm going to repeat it one more time because it's really important. We should never limit someone's access to the divine. And I'm going to tell you one more reason why. Because it's that one truth that gets you through everything. That gives you everything. And that has created a wonderful story for you in which you can have eternal life with the ones you love. It's a real beautiful fairy tale. And fairy tales have happy endings. Shari! Adi Bhagwan Paradishri Siva Parasiva Mahavishnu Kalki